They had called her cursed since she was 16, whispering cruel words in the halls of her own home, a home that never truly embraced her. Her sisters were praised for their beauty and the children they bore, her brothers for their strength and cleverness. But she was mocked for the one thing she couldn't control, being unable to carry a child. Infertile, they sneered, like the word itself was her name, a shame to be carried and never forgotten. When suitors came calling, they were turned away, not because of her refusal, but because her family told them the cruel rumor before she could even speak. By the time she turned 20, she was considered nothing but a burden, something to be tossed aside. So when a wealthy but reclusive rancher, a man rumored to be harsh and unyielding, sent word he needed help with his homestead, her family thought it would be amusing to send her off. "Let her toil like the barren soil she is," one brother laughed, and her mother even smirked as she shoved a small bag of clothes into her hands. They thought it was a joke, sending her away like a punishment, convinced she would fail, break down and return crawling. But what they didn't know was that the rancher's land, wild and sprawling, would be the place where her story truly began. The first time she saw the rancher, he was a man built of hard years and harsher labor, tall with broad shoulders, his eyes sharp as though he had measured every soul he had ever met. He did not smile, not even when she stumbled down from the wagon with her bag clutched tight. But he also did not mock her. Instead, he handed her a pair of worn gloves and told her, "Work starts at dawn. If you're here to whine, best leave now." She had expected cruelty, but what she found instead was quiet demand, man who believed in work and survival above all else. The days were long, the tasks endless, feeding livestock, fixing fences, cooking meals when her hands were blistered and shaking. But the land taught her resilience, and the man taught her discipline. Slowly, his silence became words. His words became trust, and trust became something softer, almost protective. He never once spoke the word infertile, never once looked at her as though she were broken. He only saw what she did with her hands, how she refused to quit, how she woke before the rooster to carry her share and more. And in those long evenings, when the sun burned down into the hills, she caught him watching her with something that looked an awful lot like admiration. One night a storm tore across the ranch, violent and merciless, flooding the stables and endangering the animals. She worked beside him in the rain, hair plastered to her face, her dress torn. But she held the lantern high and her spirit higher. When the worst had passed, she collapsed against the barn wall, trembling with exhaustion. He knelt beside her, his hand brushing away the mud from her cheek. His voice rough but tender when he said, "You're stronger than anyone ever gave you credit for." It was in that moment, under the shattered sky, that something between them shifted. The distance that had existed melted into closeness, and what had been duty slowly, quietly became love. The months that followed were no longer about surviving. They were about living. He showed her the hidden corners of the ranch, the wild flowers that only bloomed in spring, the secret trails carved through the hills. And she, in turn, brought laughter into the silence of his home. Music where once there had only been the creak of floorboards and the howl of wind. What her family had sent her away to destroy became the place she built a life worth keeping. When she felt the first stirrings of life inside her, she couldn't believe it. She had been told all her life it was impossible, that her body was incapable, unworthy. Yet as the months passed, there was no denying it. Her body, her heart, carried a miracle. The rancher, usually so steady, was shaken when she told him, his hands trembling as he touched her belly, his eyes wet with a joy he couldn't hide. "And they were wrong about you," he whispered, pressing his forehead against hers. "You are everything." The birth was hard, but she fought through it with the same strength she had learned on the ranch. And when the baby's cry filled the room, her world changed forever. Her daughter, perfect, strong, alive. She held her close, tears streaming down her face, while the rancher stood near, his eyes locked on the both of them, like he had finally found the home he had been searching for his whole life. It was nearly 2 years later when she returned to her family's doorstep. They didn't recognize her at first, not the strong, radiant woman who stepped from the wagon. her little girl clinging to her hip, the rancher standing protectively at her side. Her brothers stuttered in disbelief, her sisters gasped, and her mother went pale, as though seeing a ghost. She looked each of them in the eyes and smiled, not cruelly, but with the quiet triumph of someone who no longer needed their approval. "You sent me away as a joke," she said softly, her voice calm and steady. "But I came back with a family, with love, and with a child who proves you were wrong about me all along." Her words hung heavy in the silence, more powerful than anger could ever be. She didn't stay long. There was no reason to. Her home was no longer here. It was on the ranch, where love had bloomed in the place they thought she would wither. And so she walked back to the wagon, her little girl's tiny hand wrapped tightly around her finger, the rancher's hand steady on her shoulder. She didn't need her family's pride, their acceptance, or their love. She had already built something stronger. She had built a life from the ashes of their cruelty, and she knew now that no one could take it away. As the wagon rolled down the road, the farmhouse shrinking behind her, she whispered to her child,